Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on, what day is it? Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles here. I'm here with our front office insider. I don't like calling you front office insider. No. It sounds like you only can talk about the front office stuff. Bobby Marks.
Hello, Brian. Good to see you. Again.
And we're in our LA podcast studio here because we're here for trade deadline. And it's been an eventful week so far. And I'm very scared that by the time people watch and hear this, that things will have happened and we'll either have junked this podcast and had done another emergency one, or it will sound foolish. So it is Tuesday, February 4th in the afternoon, just to timestamp it. When this Luka trade went down the other day, I thought of a trade you were a part of. What year was Deron Williams trade?
2011.
Okay.
Post, another one of those trades, not the Deron trade, the Carmelo potential trade. You know, those take years off your life because we had been chasing Carmelo since September of 2010, and then of course New York comes in and the Knicks wind up getting him, and that's when All-Star Weekend was in LA. So I remember meeting with Carmelo in I don't know, some fancy restaurant, and Jay-Z was there and all that, and then you get an indication Sunday that he's going to New York, and that's when All-Star Weekend was before the trade deadline. Right. So
there was some crazy stuff that went down there.
And we go. So Monday we all convene, and I go up, and with Deron Williams was not on our radar. Trust me. Right. I go up to Billy King's office, and he goes.
Billy King was the general manager of the Nets at the time.
He goes, "What do you think about Deron Williams?" I said, "Heck of a point guard." He goes, "I think we can get him." I've talked with Kevin O'Connor, who was their GM at the time, and Deron had a little bit of a falling out with Jerry Sloan, I think, the week before.
Right, but nobody thought he was going to be traded. I mean, unless my memory is off, the last time an All-Star was traded completely out of the blue was Deron Williams.
Yeah.
And, you guys had put the package together to offer the Nuggets for Carmelo. You were pursuing Carmelo. Carmelo goes to the Knicks. And so everybody knew that you were willing to trade.
Yeah, it was basically kind of a reduced package. It was like they're still good players. It was Derek Favors, who poor Derek Favors. We had picked him third in the draft the year before, and he was in trade rumors since September. Yeah. I remember going down there in training camp, and Carmelo's name was being mentioned, and Derek Favors and Devin Harris was part of the trade, and we traded 2 ones. One turned into Enes Kanter, Freedom at the time.
That was a high lottery.
Yeah, pick. 3. I think the third pick. But the thing with that trade is that we slept on it. Okay.
Didn't leak,
nope,
right?
Did not leak. We slept on it, and the next day we pulled the trigger, and it's similar. I mean, listen. What happened on Saturday night is seismic. It's similar to the point where we had never had discussions with. I believe it's Jeff Schwartz eventually became his agent. I think Jeff might have been his agent at the time. Darren had a year and a half left on his contract.
Right, kind of like Luka does right now.
We had no indication. We were playing in Newark, New Jersey.
Right.
Going to
Prudential Center.
Eventually going to Brooklyn in 2012.
Right.
And then the lockout was coming. Right. Too. Yeah. We had no idea if Deron Williams was going to re-sign with us, but we swung for the fences there, and that's how that kind of deal that's how that deal transpired.
Yeah. So that came out of the blue. I always envisioned that the Jazz called up and said, "Hey, that trade you offered for Carmelo, we'll take it for Deron Williams." What? And
the funny part is that we had when we were doing the Carmelo stuff, we had a binder because Pete. What happened was, so Masai Ujiri, who's now the president of the Toronto Raptors,
he was running the Nuggets at the time.
He had that was his first job. Masai was a scout,
right?
And I just remember all these different things that happened. I was in Disney World with my they were little, and I remember Billy calling me, "Hey, there's this guy in Denver named Masai. You know him and stuff." What happened is that the negotiations between Denver and us, Billy and Masai, became so hostile that basically myself and Pete D'Alessandro, who's now with the Magic, were the lead people in this.
Yeah.
And that's how we were. And so we had this whole binder with everything. And then we eventually, as far as just, it was like kind of a watered down, not a watered down. Utah still got good value out of that, but that's how that kind of transpired.
Well, I will say, since we're telling stories at the start of this, which I don't even know why we're doing this on trade deadline week, but it's my podcast, so I don't care. The general manager of the Nuggets, who Masai replaced, was Mark Warkentine.
Yeah.
Mark Warkentine and I were friends. And Mark Warkentine had been he was executive of the year and got let go by many executives over the years who have been very good by the Nuggets, have been let go basically because Stan Kroenke, the owner, doesn't like to pay executives, long story short. And the most recent one was Tim Connolly, but Mark Warkentine was one. Masai Ujiri was one. Tim Connolly was one. We'll see what happens with Calvin Booth. So Mark Warkentine had been let go. He couldn't come to terms on a contract. He had been executive of the year. He wasn't like fired. He was just contract ran out. And Mark was essentially working for the Knicks.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all secret at the time. But I remember having dinner with Mark in Portland. He lived in Portland. And he had his full sheet out of how he was advising the Knicks to deal with the Nuggets on how to get Carmelo.
Yeah.
And he was later hired by the Knicks and worked for many years in their front office. Mark passed away recently, which is why I have no problem telling the story.
The running joke, and this is, I never told this story. The running joke was about 7 months later, my wife and I had gotten invited to the Kim Kardashian, Chris Humphries wedding.
I'm here for this.
And
this is how we're gonna get record numbers on this pod. Jackson's gonna say Kim Kardashian.
At one time in Newark, New Jersey, we had Kim Kardashian and Maria Sharapova because she was dating Sasha Vujic. We had both of them, and so we had gotten invited to the wedding in Santa Barbara. I think it was at Oprah's.
Oprah's house.
Yeah. And it was black tie. And
isn't that Ojai? Isn't that like technically Ojai? All right, forget about it. I'm not interrupting you anymore.
And it was black tie, and I remember going, and I wore a white tuxedo jacket because I wanted to stand out.
Good move, Bobby.
And I pulled up, and Carmelo was there with a white tuxedo jacket on, and I said to him, It was bad enough that we didn't get you. Now you just stole my moment.
Right.
But the wedding is another podcast in itself. But yes, we were at the Kardashian wedding. Yes.
I'm here for that podcast.
With Chris Humphries. The funniest is always people ask me, "Would you get him?" And I said I didn't get anything because I knew in 3 months they were probably going to be divorced. So there's like kind of that unwritten rule.
Well, I remember at the time Woj was writing for Yahoo. Mm-hmm. And, he was breaking stories left and right. Yeah. He was writing these columns that were like flaming missiles. Like, he was a great columnist. He was ripping David Stern. Yeah. And, Yahoo was a major, you used to work for Yahoo, obviously. Yeah. Yahoo at the time was like a major portal site, one of the leaders, probably more hits than ESPN. And his number one story that he ever did, not like whatever trade he ever broke, I can't even remember what his great trades were with Yahoo, was when, I think it was very basic that source, Chris Humphries did not know Kardashian was filing for some Humphries divorce story, like got 275 million.
Yeah.
Like Sham's tweet,
93 million, I think.
I think it's might even higher than that. Like he may never. Shams may break 1,000 stories and not add up to. Well, I'm sure it will.
God. That night will go. That Saturday night or Sunday morning will go down as. What did you think when you saw that?
I'm desensitized to everything.
But
I was
still,
like, oh, okay, they traded Luka.
It did kind of.
No. To me, it was. I cannot believe that the Mavericks traded Luka, and as I thought about it more, I mean, we did the podcast shortly thereafter, but so at the minute I saw it, I was just like, wow, like there's something happened with Luka,
right?
And the more I worked on it, they just didn't like him, and I had this guy who's an all-star who I know who's an all-star, current all-star now. He texts me, he's like, wow, they really, really hate him,
right?
And I won't say anything more because I don't want to reveal. But this person has a very large contract.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you imagine if you were about to sign your contract?
Oh
and you got
man,
traded?
that was the first thing I thought of when he got traded. Supermax.
Well, what is I've been like using general numbers.
Yeah.
Would you tell me the exact numbers we're talking about here?
5 for $345, largest contract in NBA history. That's what he was eligible for.
This actually is a spin forward. So today, Luka had his first press conference. He didn't say a whole heck of a lot. One thing that he did say was that, because there had been some speculation, or maybe somebody reported it, but there had been speculation that the reason that they traded him was because he had indicated he wouldn't sign that Supermax, which I found absurd. But I don't know. I don't know everything. And he was like, absolutely not. He's like, easy question. And of course, easy question. Yeah. Excuse me, sir. Would you have accepted that $350 million contract? Yes, I would. Okay, thank you. But now the Lakers don't have that. No. Once you get traded, you lose the ability to get the Supermax.
Yeah. Once you get, if you're traded in your first 4 years in a league, you can still carries with you. But once you get, he's basically just like any other person who,
right. And the reason,
but there's still some incentives, certainly more years and bigger increase. But no, as I said yesterday, it's basically kind of a little bit of a level playing field.
The reason that rule exists is they don't want somebody to get their first max contract and then force a trade and then still get the Supermax. They want you to have to stay through your whole first contract and to get the Supermax. And then once you sign the Supermax, you're not allowed to be traded for a year.
Yeah, right.
So they want to prevent you from even like getting the Supermax and going, ha ha ha, now that I got it, I'm out of here.
Well, remember, it used to be too that you can only have 2 guys on per team.
That's right.
So that went away with this CBA.
Right. By the way, I had an executive tell me the other day, with the new CBA, there's really only 10 max players in this league.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, there's certainly circumstantial max.
Right.
Like, no offense to Paul George in Philly. Right. I mean, I think that's kind of a circumstantial based on based on everything that happened there. And but yeah, there's probably a handful of guys.
Yeah. But I would thought Luka was on that list.
Yeah, I thought too. Like, even like we were on Tuesday, we were talking on TV, like, like certainly the list of guys, and I would Shea and Giannis and Jokic and Curry and certainly LeBron and that group, and then you're thinking like, well, wait a minute, like Luka just got traded, like you can anybody could, right? I think it could. Man, it's hard to keep it under wraps. That's one of the bigger takeaways from this.
Well, one of the things, I think The Athletic reported this. They reported that one of the reasons why the Lakers were able to keep their second first-round pick is that the Lakers wanted to talk to Luka and say, hey, if we trade for you, will you sign here this summer?
Right.
And the Mavericks didn't want Luka to know. They wanted to get this deal done. And so they said, no, you can't. So Lakers said, well, we may, if we get here and Luka says, no, I got to have this player or this, we need something to trade for it. And the Mavericks, if that is indeed true, and I believe it, the Mavericks like, okay, keeping this quiet is worth maybe even giving up another Laker pick.
Yeah.
Because I think they were worried about what would happen if it got public. And so the Luka contract now becomes a little bit of a topic, which you brought up in our meeting. We had a production meeting, and I haven't been stopped thinking about it. Not that I don't want to make it sound like the Lakers should be stressed, but what can Luka do this summer now that the Supermax isn't around?
Yeah, starting on August 2nd, he could extend for 4 years, $229 million. That's the most that he could extend
plus
for.
Plus the fifth year, the year that he's got left.
Plus he's got another, so you're probably getting over 270-ish, somewhere around there.
Right, so the difference between 350 and 270.
Well, yeah, I mean, add another 350 and then add another 50. So 400.
400.
Yeah.
So the difference between 400 and 270, that doesn't include that Texas has 0% state income tax, and California in the highest bracket, I think, is over 14%.
Right.
So
he could do that. I think the logical decision would be, if he extends, would be a shorter deal, similar to kind of what Donovan Mitchell did this summer, where you're basically doing a 3-year deal with a player option the third year, because that would take him to 10 years of service. And what 10 years of service means is that he could sign for 35% of the salary cap, which is essentially the super.
Right. So what the Supermax really is that, you're allowed to get a certain level of max with 4 years or 3 years experience, right? Then with 7 years experience, you get the next level, which is 5% more. And then at 10 years, you get 5% more. And that 5% is a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what you're basically able to do with the Supermax essentially is for that second max contract, what I call the stress max,
Right.
the fun max, the stress max, the legacy max. If you sign for the stress max, you get the legacy max price. So you get the 10-year price at year 7.
Yep.
So it basically incentivizes you. It's like speeding up. You know how Shaq says I'm G15 certified or whatever?
Right.
It's like speeding up from G10 to G15. Anyway, so, it's not nothing that the Lakers, and August 2nd's key.
Yep.
Because he will get to see what the Lakers do in July. He'll get to see how the season plays out, what the Lakers do in July. He'll know what their roster is when he gets to have that put in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, and the roster is pretty much, certainly things can happen up to the deadline. Really, the only players that are free agents are the guys on the minimum contracts: Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish. Those are everyone else is under. Well, certainly LeBron is going to be. Certainly we'll circle him because he's got a player option here. But the roster is, it is what it is. You've got your, certainly Dalton Knecht, and what we'll learn is certainly how does the backcourt work, him and Austin Reeves, because Austin Reeves at the end of the day is their biggest outside of that pick in 2031. That's their biggest trade chip. So there is work to do. Rob Pelinka in the press conference on Tuesday said that, like he's aware of what they need to do, but as much as we like to talk about trades, like it takes two to tango, right? You got to find a partner.
How much do you think Rob Pelinka's jacket cost? Malika, who knows fine clothing, she pegged it at $4,200.
I wish I had his style. I wish I had his 4 more inches of height.
Yeah.
I could be that height, but but no, but as I said, he's self-aware. He said it and it was a great question. It was like, does there feel added pressure? And no, he's like, I felt pressure ever since I've taken the job here.
Oh my God. I got to look at this text. I want to get it right. So I was texting another high-ranking executive about the Lakers today. And I go, hey, what'd you think of Rob's jacket? Just joking. Cause the whole league was watching that press conference. He goes, he could be wearing a Speedo right now if he wanted to. He's got a lifetime job after that trade. So I appreciated that. So just the Lakers do have to, right now, as we do this podcast, we'll see what happens tonight with the Clippers, but they are tied with the Nuggets in the loss column for 4th. So they're in good shape.
Yep.
And they got Luka Doncic. And I don't know how their team. I think if they don't have a big man, they're going to be in trouble. But I do think Pelinka said that the center market was dry.
Yeah, it's
do you agree with that?
I do. Because I think the biggest name out there is Miles Turner, and Miles Turner is an interesting name because there's certainly a priority in Indiana to sign him.
Yes.
He's one of these unique cases where he's not extension eligible. Usually you get to a point like him and D'Angelo Russell, Brook Lopez, kind of 3 guys that are just, they're not, he doesn't fit the criteria. But why I mentioned Indiana's playing really good basketball.
They really believe in their team.
Yeah. They're, top 6 in the Eastern Conference. They've kind of gotten back on good footing. And in the Miles Turner situation, they can figure that out in the summer.
Yeah.
They're $20 million below the luxury tax. They potentially could go into tax, but also they could make some moves to give them some more flexibility.
I don't think their intention is to go into tax.
Yeah, no.
So
no, not next year, I don't think.
But the reason that people, I just spent some time with the Pacers in Paris, and they love Miles Turner.
Yeah.
I think they want to keep him.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of a crunch there because they signed Andrew Nembhard to an extension, and his money comes on. Plus, Tyler Hero is on a supermax. Tyler Hero.
Halliburton.
Tyler Halliburton. 2 Wisconsin guys. Tyrese Halliburton, sorry. And Pascal Siakam is on max. And so those contracts go up a lot.
Well, the funny thing about Indiana is that, and this was a team executive had mentioned this to me last year, with this new CBA, they're the perfect team, right? 2 max guys, and then like everyone else between 0 and 20 million.
Yeah.
And then those 20 million, like it keeps on adding up.
Yeah,
and
it's
everything.
not 20 million anymore. Now it's 26. Now it's 29.
Yeah, someone
now it's
breaks
34.
through that barrier. So now
Yeah.
if you're Miles Turner and you're 25, now it's like all of a sudden getting expensive. But I do think that the center market is somewhat thin. Listen, Robert Williams in Portland's another name.
Yeah, Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah, but you've got one big trade asset.
Right.
You're limited on your seconds.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part as far as having the patience to maybe wait and maybe there's something better comes.
Don't worry, Laker fans. It'll all work out. That's my thing. After 22 years covering the NBA, I'll just say it'll all work out. Yep. Don't worry. The team that's fascinating, and I am openly admitting that things could all be different by the time this pod posts, but are the Golden State Warriors. After the game that they played the Orlando Magic on Monday night. They won, and they're about to go on a long road trip. I think it's 7 games.
Yep.
Starts here in LA on Thursday. And Draymond Green said after the game, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, Joe Lacob, the owner, is not happy. We're 500. And when Joe's not happy, things happen. And there's tension right now. And, he was smiling a little bit, but you could see it on his face. There was tension. And I know that we've gone through these phases with the Warriors, and it was just a couple of weeks ago where Steve Kerr and Steph Curry were like, yeah, we can't do anything desperate. Ladies and gentlemen, that is out the window. The Warriors are being uber aggressive now. They were aggressive last year when they tried to get LeBron James. They were aggressive last summer when they tried to get Paul George and Lauri Markkanen. Just because you're being aggressive doesn't mean they're getting the star. But they are absolutely being aggressive. And I really can't predict what's going to happen. Or nothing, Bobby.
Well, and that's the beauty of the trade deadline is because it's, games impact your decision is not in July in Las Vegas at Summer League, right? You have it's like real life situations here. A Golden State team that's hanging on, that's, trying to hang on to get into the play-in. I think they're tied with Phoenix as of Tuesday.
As of right now, 9, 10, and 11 are all tied.
Yeah.
The SAC, Lakers, Suns. It's a real strong Pacific Division 500 basketball showing there.
Yeah, I mean, and they have, like, I said this on TV on Tuesday, like there's a part of you that says, you know what, hey, just pick up your chips and walk away.
Yeah.
Right? Come back. I'll see you in 5 months. But then there's the other part is like you got Curry on your roster. How do you add to what you can add to the roster and not knowing that someone else might be there and we don't know who's going to be available come July. So if it is Jimmy Butler, and there's no guarantee that he's going to extend or sign. I always say that he's got that $52 million player option. Don't forget about that. And they've got all these expirings. Like there's like once we get past the deadline, like the expirings don't mean anything anymore. And the Wiggins contract's huge. So that's your big number.
Right. Wiggins has been playing.
Yeah.
Wiggins has been playing better recently. The body of work is pretty big right now. It's not like maybe Wiggins. You know what you're getting with Andrew Wiggins, but he has been playing better in the last few weeks.
Yeah, and you've got your younger players. Kuminga's been hurt, and you've got they're one of those few teams that has most of their draft picks. I think they can trade 3 in the next 7 years. So they are sitting in a pretty good spot if they want to just pounce on it. And listen, does it change? I don't know. Does it change move the needle? We'll see.
Yeah,
I mean that's the biggest thing.
Well, the thing with Jimmy Butler, he's telling everybody he's not going to extend. And he's doing that not because he hates the Grizzlies or hates the Warriors, but because he's trying to force that weight at the Suns. And the Suns are trying like crazy. We'll talk about them in a few minutes. The Suns are trying like crazy to pull off this miracle. But at some point, if that door closes, if they just can't do anything, Jimmy doesn't want to be in Miami. And at the end of the day, as you mentioned earlier, a team might call Jimmy's bluff that he's really going to walk away from $52 million into a market that doesn't have that many teams with cap space. And, if you get Jimmy and he's motivated because he has to make sure he gets his contract, and even if he picks up that $52 million option, he then becomes a $52 million expiring contract, teams could talk themselves into that. And there's also the possibility of this. You could trade for Jimmy Butler now, play him out for the rest of the season, and then he could opt out of his contract, and you could sign and trade him in the summer. If he found a place he could go to, you could sign and trade him. And, the Warriors have to consider that. They've had difficulty getting this star player because they haven't been willing to include all their stuff. They haven't been willing to include Podziemski. They haven't been willing to include Kuminga. They have first-round picks to trade. They haven't wanted to give them all away. And the Jimmy Butler price might be low enough that they say to just do it, regardless of whether they can get him to the extension. But it may not just be Butler. Like, look, it's out there. They've called on Durant.
Yep.
And I can tell you that there's a debate out there, like, did the Kings or did the Suns call or did the Warriors call? I don't know. I'm not trying to say who called whom.
Right. They've
discussed Kevin Durant.
Well, yes. And I think there, as I've said before, there has to be that conversation. Just because of where Phoenix is, they're right where Golden State is.
Right.
They've lost 3 out of their last 4. They just lost in Portland. The Portland team was playing really well.
9 out of 10.
I know.
I feel
we can punt them out of the Cooper flag.
Can I just apologize? I want to apologize to 2 teams right now. I want to apologize to the Grizzlies, who have won 9 out of 10, and I want to apologize to the Portland Trailblazers and their fans. We never talk about the Trailblazers. I'm sorry. We will get to you, but there's too much bleep going on. I'm sorry that the Blazers and Toumani Camara and Denny Avdia, they made a really good trade to get him. DeAndre Ayton had 20 and 20 the other night. I'm sorry. I can't do it. I can't do it right now. But I mean, if you're the Suns and you just took it in the teeth twice in Portland, you're not feeling too good about your situation. And if you can't turn Bradley Beal into Jimmy Butler, if you exhaust yourself and do that, you're looking at a reality where Kevin Durant is going to be 1 year left on his contract, and you either extend him this summer or what. And so I've described it as if they can't trade Beal and this team isn't working, and Durant is 1 year left, and you're not sure whether he's going to extend. Next thing you know, you've just painted yourself into a corner.
Yep.
And so if somebody calls you, or you have a call and wants to talk about Kevin Durant, you have to listen to that.
Well, yeah. I mean, the reality of it is that if you are Phoenix and you're sitting at 500 and you got swept a year ago, what makes you think things are going to be different a year from now? And the reality is if you can't find a home,
and you can't trade Bradley
Beal,
yeah,
you're basically, it's the same. And they have some more optionality. I said, with the picks, and they're trying to trade Nurkic, and but they're still a second. They're still a second apron team a year from now. I think it's worth exploring as far as because when this thing ends in Phoenix, like, it's going to end bad.
Well, unless they do something first, and here's the other option. Just the concept of possibly trading Durant, you get a lot of stuff, and even if you can then trade that stuff,
right, and
even maybe go acquire another player who maybe doesn't sink you down. Like, you're not breaking up a championship roster here. You picked them to.
I did.
I don't want to poke you. I was a big believer in them last year.
Yeah,
but I was.
Well, I liked what they, certainly I liked what they did in the offseason. I liked getting Tyus Jones and Mason Plumlee, and
Royce O'Neal was a good pickup last year.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of things that you could like about it, but then you watch, the game of Portland, Tyus Jones plays 17 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like, Durant and Booker, and they're playing 40 minutes plus. So Bud's trying to maximize as much as he can, and the depth I thought they had is not as good as we probably thought.
We said for the second consecutive year.
Yeah.
The Suns and Warriors are the 2 teams that are very volatile, where anything could happen. And by the way, they could find a Jimmy Butler. They could find a Bradley Beal trade. There are some dim but realistic avenues out there for Beal. I'm skeptical after all these weeks. But they could land Butler and have their new trio and have a fighting chance. But they could also not and have to face some hard realities. So if you're a Suns fan and a Warriors fan between now and Thursday afternoon, buckle up. Bobby, let's talk about some teams or maybe some players that we're still not sure what's going to happen with, that might come down to Thursday. I'll start. How about Brandon Ingram, who we've heard almost nothing about?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have not seen Brandon Ingram since he sprained that ankle. We knew we would eventually get to this point right before the trade deadline. Certainly when they did not agree to an extension in the offseason. And I think if you're New Orleans right now, you have basically essentially two choices. You could keep Ingram and figure out something in the offseason in a sign trade, or you could look to move him, but probably at a less than desirable package. I think the biggest thing for them is that when you have DeJounte Murray and CJ McCollum and Zion and Trey Murphy extension, they're not in a position to take money back that extends long term here. So that's certainly, as I said this last week. Everyone got a kick out of it. I go, they're going to make a trade 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
They're going to get under the luxury tax.
I would almost argue that is the biggest guarantee for Thursday, because this is a team that's never paid the tax, and they sure are as heck are not going to pay the tax for this team.
No.
And the thing about the tax is, even if you're just a little bit into it, let's say you're $5 million worth of tax into it. It's more than that, right, Bobby?
Yeah, it's 7.5 million. That's actually going to be changed though. They're doing and when July rolls around, they've basically adjusted the tax rule where it's for the first bracket, the 0 to 5 bracket, it's going to be dollar for dollar.
Right, but if you're $1 into the tax, let's just say for the sake of argument, you're $1 into the tax. Yes, you may only be paying $3 in tax, but you don't get the distribution.
Don't get anything. And that was a big thing teams had fought for. Certainly what they wanted was that if you just dip in, maybe you get 60% of the tax distribution back here, but you do not get anything.
Right. So last year, how much was the distribution?
Last year, I think it was like significant. This year's the most ever.
It'll be
almost 16 million. I mean, it could go down. It'll probably go down a little bit every time a team. We've had the Clips came out of it. We saw Dallas came out of it, and then they went back in.
Teams will come out of the tax, but basically, here's the thing. If you are in the tax, you're not only paying the tax, but you're losing everybody else's tax money. So if you dip out of the tax, it can be a $20+ million move, even if it's just a couple million in. So New Orleans is going to get their $20 million.
They're gonna get out 1.4. When you're 1.4, you're gonna get out. When you're Philly, maybe you're at 6.5 after the Quentin Grimes trade. Hey, you've got Kelly Oubre, right? And if you're a team that thinks you're going to lose guys to free agency, he's got a player option. Yabusele's another guy like you, and you're kind of. I was joking with the team. I'm like, you know what? Philly's going to probably make the play-in based on process of elimination. Right. When you look at Chicago, who knows what happens with Atlanta? But the goal is it's a nice chunk of change that you get back.
Well, the thing about Brandon Ingram is that he's a high-level player. And you can get him for this year and help with your team this year. It may help your playoff positioning. And then you get his rights.
Yeah.
And, the price for him is probably going to be pretty low, what I would guess. And you might even be able to get New Orleans to take some money, especially if you give them even a little bit of draft capital. I'm keeping an eye on Atlanta. Atlanta is no incentive to lose, because they don't have their pick. Their pick goes to San Antonio. They've been losing ever since Jalen Johnson got hurt. They have expiring contracts, but they also have a guy like Bogdan Bogdanovic who they owe money to next year that they might like to get off of. And if you get a guy like Brandon Ingram, maybe he helps you this year get in the play-in. They have a great record against the Cavs and the Celtics. Maybe they can do something. And, that helps their young players with the experience. And then maybe you can resign and trade them. Toronto is another team that's been linked to Brandon Ingram.
Well, they've got all those expirings. They've got
Bruce
Brown, Chris Boucher. That gets you $32-33 million. And you're right. Like I always said this to an agent. I said, the most valuable thing you could have is bird rights. That's we went through that exercise with Chris Paul, who had bird rights forever. Until he signed with San Antonio. He was waived by Golden State and signed with San Antonio. But because once you don't and you go into free agency, it's like the land of the unknown.
Yeah. And there's so many things that you can do with bird rights.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly sign and trade. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing. If that team doesn't want to sign you, as far as kind of relocate you to somewhere that doesn't have cap space and you can get something back for it.
So, okay. So in addition to Brandon Ingram, who maybe else that is not on the front line of all this stuff are you keeping an eye on?
Well, I mean, I think from a team standpoint, I think certainly Detroit, right? I think that's.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's
$15 million in cap
about
space.
14. I mean, there's
14.
different ways. Certainly, as a third or fourth team facilitator, and you brought it up on TV, like the new CBA. What the new CBA has done is we don't see the 2-team trades anymore, unless it's Charlotte and Oklahoma City at night, and they're swapping second round. They're swapping
Right.
second round picks here.
That was a crazy, very interesting trade.
Because they both had that, like Denver pick in 2030 was like different layers to that. I think certainly. I think Detroit is a team certainly to circle here. The teams that we call them like the middlemen, the Utahs, the Charlottes, as you mentioned, the Toronto, the Wizards. Wizards are another team,
Right.
Just because they've got some big exceptions and they're well below the luxury tax. I would say Brooklyn, but Brooklyn's not in a position. I don't see a Cam Johnson trade out there.
That was the player I would say 3 weeks ago we thought was guaranteed to be traded, but there's been nothing with him.
Yeah, nothing. You know what's hard, Brian, is that when you have Brooklyn and Oklahoma City and San Antonio and Utah, Houston, some of those teams, when you have all those teams that monopolize the first round picks, like it's so hard to pull from, because most teams have 2 picks, or maybe some has 1. That they're the ability to get multiple ones in a deal is really hard. Yeah,
there's an imbalance that is happening with too many teams having too many picks, and as a result, you're going to start seeing deals like the Suns made with the Jazz, where they do a 3-for-1, where the volume of picks will matter less than the quality of the picks. And teams will make moves to more balance out their picks. These teams that are pick rich, they don't want to have 4 rookies in 1 year. They have to move them around, and it has to balance. The market demands it. You can't have 4 teams with 4 picks alone in each draft. Like it's not going to work. Oklahoma City is they can't draft that many first round players. They will not be able to.
That's why Utah did the trade with Phoenix, where you're consolidating. Where
right.
You're trading. I'll give you 3 of my lesser for 1 really good one.
Right. So I think that's what you will see is more picks like that. Washington is interesting. Washington is guaranteed pretty much to have a bottom 3 record, but they are not guaranteed to avoid history for being the worst team of all time. They did get a big win over the weekend against Minnesota. I think they're playing tonight. Now that we'll reverse jinx them into victory tonight.
Well, and it's 2009-10 in New Jersey, we were 12-70.
Oh my God, Bobby!
And that was, you look up in the standings and you're like 6-40, and you still got 35, 36 more games. It wears on you, and I know where the Wizards are certainly trying to, and we wound up getting the 3rd pick in the draft. The lottery odds were different then, and we wound up picking Derek Favors. John Wall went number 1. Evan Turner, I think, went 2. And it's it saps the life out of you when you're
12-7.
When you're
that's a lot of bad days.
Oh my God, we could write a book on that. I mean, like, listen, we had a voodoo, someone who practiced voodoo come in and do stuff with our players.
Like right out of that movie, The Natural. Like
we had a fight in the locker room between a coach and a player. We had our general manager Kiki Vandeweghe become the head coach.
That's right. Oh my God, what a miserable.
We had
year.
There was a lot of different. That was one of the most bizarre years. And then Kiki, not funny story, but we were in Chicago for pre-draft, and Kiki had found we were sitting in a meeting, and Kiki had found out that he had gotten fired.
Oh my God!
From a press conference from
he
Mikhail
got fired
Prokhorov.
as coach or GM?
Both. Yeah.
Oh.
And listen, when you're where the Wizards are, the goal is certainly to get a top pick, but it saps a lot out of you.
So the Wizards are maybe potentially a little bit incentivized to avoid infamy, and they may. Not like they're not going to like trade for a player to get better, but I think the Wizards, quite frankly, they're not that far from the hinky zone. they didn't name it. Trust the process.
Right.
So it's not. But like they're really bad, and they're a ways away.
Yeah.
And,
2 years away from 2 years away.
And if you have the third, that's right. If you have the third worst record, you have the same odds as the first worst record, and they're guaranteed to have that 14%. So it wouldn't stun me if, knowing that they need to do something to take on some money, that they they have to spend something to get some assets, that they would get a player or two that might actually help them win a little bit more and maybe not lose, because they're losing every game by double digits.
Right.
Like maybe make a couple of more palatable nights in the back half of the season.
Well, that's right. I mean, and then even if it's a guy in the last year of his contract, and then as we were talking before, then maybe you can kind of flip it into something else.
Yeah. So I also, there's a couple of teams that are just going to be generally active. Utah is probably not done.
Yeah.
John Collins is an interesting name. Collins was a guy who we thought was going to Sacramento. That was strong out there before they, traded De'Aaron Fox. Collins has value and is having a good year. That's a player who Utah could sell that could end up with a contender.
It's funny when John Collins signed the contract in Atlanta, you're thinking, man, this contract's never going to be traded. And then he goes from Atlanta to Utah.
It took him a while to trade it.
It did. He was basically on the block, and then certainly he's having a really good year in Utah right now. But yeah, I mean, there's another team that's kind of positioning for a top three pick in the draft
for sure. Anybody else? Yeah, I think Milwaukee. We talked about that a little bit on TV today. Maybe the deal will even be happened by the time.
Yeah, Milwaukee's interesting just because where they are with the second apron. You get under the second apron, you get the flexibility of having your pick. They've lost their last two games by 55 points total.
Yeah, they didn't play anybody against OKC on Monday night,
and the night that I guess a couple nights before, San Antonio drubbed them by 26, 27 here. They're an interesting because there are nights where they look really good, and then some nights where they look anything close to being a top three team in the Eastern Conference here. And Milwaukee's an interesting because they've been in attacks for so long, and they're spending here that they've got, as you said, like some hard decisions coming up. Certainly Brook Lopez, who could become a free agent. Chris Middleton, who's still there. Bobby Portis. The two main guys, of course, are untouchable for now. I mean, it's funny. I said untouchable, and then I think of Luka.
Oh, my God. Everything's changed. Your perspective just changes so much. Bobby, there's going to be some stuff that doesn't happen by Thursday that's going to set up things in this summer. It always happens every year. Sometimes it's failed deals that end up leading to summer, but some teams that end up leading to deals in the summer. But some teams are going to need to do some business based on this. What are you looking at leading into summer that may not get settled right now?
Well, I mean, certainly the Lakers, right? I mean, I think if they don't get a center and they basically go by committee for the last 35, 40 games, that's going to be a priority. The beauty of the summer is that there's always, what you don't know right now is that there's going to be a couple guys and there's going to be a couple teams that lose. Losing in the first round is always a reactionary decision. Or maybe if you lose in the NBA Finals, it's a reactionary decision like Dallas here with Luka here. But I think that's the biggest thing as far as certainly the Lakers, as far as what they're able to do. Dallas is interesting, certainly, because Kyrie could become a free agent. That's
a huge thing. I mean, so Kyrie signed for significantly less than the max, a pretty big pay cut.
Yep.
And he's played really well. And now he's their star guard.
Right.
They traded their other star guard.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a player option, in his contract there. I mean, certainly, Brooklyn will be the wild card, of course, just because they're sitting on not just the draft picks, they're sitting on, $65-70 million in potential room. Average at best free agent class to say. I mean, but we always say it's average at best, and then all of a sudden things happen.
I know.
Milwaukee, of course, right? I mean, like, hey, you lose in the first round again. Of course, we're going to probably hear whispers, of course, as far as what happens with
Giannis
the future.
has made some comments over the last week that are make you scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. He made the comments about European players being in big markets, and the first thing I thought of it, my friends in Denver will probably think like, why are we? How did we get lumped in this?
Took a stray. He's like,
our guy likes it here.
Jokic should be in New York. Jokic should be in Los Angeles. Huh? What'd you say, Giannis? Yeah, I don't even know. I had to go back and like try to find the whole interview because I was like, that had to be out of weird context.
Yeah, the Giannis had the last week has been some interesting. He wanted to. He had the Chris Paul situation. Then he wanted to meet with Chris at half court to kind of like talk things over, and then he had the comments.
Yeah, he's like, I'll see you after the game.
There's Chris like, yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's those are. I think Philly will be interesting. We'll see Embiid, who's scheduled to play on Tuesday, come back and like, I mean. Yeah, that extension hasn't even started yet. Still has $240 million left after this season. That's an interesting discussion to have.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I actually think Kyrie is going to be a fascinating one. And also Dallas, like they are in super win now mode.
Yeah,
and they may do they did a deal today with Caleb Martin. They may do some more business this summer. But I promise you, when we do our next podcast, which is supposed to be on Friday, unless there's an emergency one before it, we will have a lot to talk about what could happen with the summer. So, Bobby, I'm looking forward. Every year, most years you've been in Bristol, but you have been out here before. You have this whole setup that you do on trade deadline day.
I used to, besides my shoe collection that I brought out here, I had about 9 pairs of shoes. I heard the podcast when you had McMahon on about his shoe collection. So
yeah,
I got inspired. I usually in the past I had a big monitor that I would actually have a certain bag and I just wheel it because I need a monitor. You
literally would bring a giant monitor
in a bag in a travel bag. And because I need 2 monitors because I need to see things.
Yeah.
And then I went on, and then I bought a gadget. I think I might have been talking to it with my wife at dinner, and you know how things are on like Facebook when you talk about it. It's like all of a sudden things pop up.
That's freaky.
It's a connector that connects to my into my laptop, and you can pull double screens from the side. And it's a cool
little device.
Exhibit, I think. I know I'm probably butchering the company.
It's a lot better than having a suitcase full of just shoes and then a bag with a separate giant monitor.
Right. 4 bags as far
Bobby,
as...
when you're at ESPN, there are literally 6,000 monitors.
But available. You know what? The beauty why I like being out here too, is that I feel like when we're in Bristol, no offense to Bristol, it's like you're like, it's like you're there. Like you're not leaving. I'm not going for a walk. I can't, here it's like at least... There's the moment of freedom. I do miss the chicken sandwiches from that cafeteria that I'm sure Shams is. I don't know if he's eating chicken sandwiches, but he's probably gotten accustomed to there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, it's good to be out here, and we'll have a great show on Thursday. Hopefully, some of the bigger stuff.
Jackson wants to know if you missed the hotel cookies.
I do. That is my biggest arch nemesis. Is that rolling into the hotel at 2 a.m. and then eating 2 cookies? That's probably not good for you.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on trade deadline week that's not good for you at ESPN. Yeah, we sent Shams to Bristol. We said, Shams, in your first year at ESPN, you're not allowed to be in LA. You must go to Bristol. It's a rite of passage. Right. You have to be there. Yeah, and make sure there's a snowstorm you have to fight through on the way in. All right. Thank you for listening to Loop Collective. Thank you to Jackson and Rafa, our producers, and Josh, who's our special producer for the day, and Devin, all those guys. Thank you to Bobby for coming out and all their hard work this week. Who knows if this podcast is actually going to run in the form it was run. I really hope so because I need to rest tonight. And we'll talk to you later this week after the trade deadline.